Good evening, everyone. We are in Genesis chapter 25. I am going to attempt to do two chapters tonight. Together, they are about the same length, maybe a little slightly longer than the last chapter 24, which was 67 verses long. But we are going to look at the end of the life of Abraham, and we're going to look at Isaac, and really the two of the very few chapters that are about Isaac. He, as I said last night, was a bit of a transition character. Took after his father in a lot of ways, but he, to me, has always been just kind of a transition character between Abraham and Jacob. Not too many chapters about him because of that. So we'll wait for a couple more people to get on, and then we will get started. As always, I'm going to be reading out of the King James, but I will have the ESV up, and I will be using it tonight to clear up a couple of things for the modern English language. And then I will also be looking at a lot of Hebrew tonight, because a lot of the original language here, because there's a lot of names, there's a lot of things that are named based on meanings, and so we're going to cover that. I am ready to go. I got my drink. I don't have my big red cup. I put it in the dishwasher. It needed a good washing, so anyway, hey John, welcome aboard. We're getting ready to just get started here. So, all right, Genesis 25 and verse 1. Then again Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah, and she bare him Zimran, and Jokshan, and Medan, and Midian, and Ishbak, and Shua. Now, of course, Midian is a fairly famous name. Hey Jerry, welcome aboard. Good to see you here. We'll see him, or at least his descendant Jethro, in a few generations here after they come back out of, not after they come back out, dealing with Moses. Hey Nikki, welcome aboard. Glad you could be here tonight. So just keep in mind that these are descendants of Abraham. And one of the trivia questions that I like to ask a lot is, how many children did Abraham have? And a lot of people, some people will answer one. They'll think about Isaac. A lot of people will answer two, because they'll remember Isaac and Ishmael. But if you read this passage here, Abraham actually had 8 children. He had one by Hagar, one by Sarah, and then he took Keturah, who apparently was a lot younger and of childbearing age. Hey Mom, welcome aboard. And so he had 6 by her. Interesting here, Isaac was not Abraham's only son, but Isaac was Abraham's only son by Sarah. Arthur, Lisa, welcome aboard. Lots of people coming on tonight. That's exciting. So that's the deal. Abraham had 8 children, and 6 of them were by Keturah, and Midian comes into play later. Hey Stephen, welcome aboard. So, all right, verse 3. And Jokshan begat Sheba and Dedan, and the sons of Dedan were Ashurim and Letushim and Leumim. And I'm going to butcher some of these names, but I'm not a native speaker, so hey Buck, welcome aboard. Verse 4, and the sons of Midian, Ephah and Epher and Hanach, and Abidah and Eldah. All these were the children of Keturah, or the descendants of Keturah. And we talked about that last night a little bit too, where descendants, or sometimes when they use the word son or daughter or children, they're using the word to mean descendants. They're not direct children of. So, and Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac, but unto the sons of the concubines which Abraham had. So apparently he even had more than just the 8, but only 8 are named. And he gave gifts, but sent them away. I would argue I would argue here, Rachel, Rosalind, welcome aboard, that the word here concubine is actually referencing both Hagar and Keturah in the sense of they were not Sarah. And so I don't know that concubine is in the traditional sense of the word. Hagar was not, she wasn't a concubine in the typical sense, and Keturah is actually called his wife. So this is a wife that he takes later in life after Sarah is dead. But the point here that Moses is making, because remember, this is still Moses that is writing this to the Israelite nation, talking about their history and where they come from and where all these nations come from. Hey, Megan, welcome aboard. Man, a lot of people on tonight. This is super exciting. But as Abraham, or as Moses writes these things, he's telling the Israelites, hey, this is where you came from. This is your history. And this is the nations that surround you and the people that you're going to be interacting with. And they needed to know this. As they're wandering in the wilderness, they're encountering these nations. So he's saying, not only is this your history, but these nations that we're wandering around and encountering, this is where they come from too. And so this is why this is important. It's not just kind of this boring history. There's actual need for the Israelites to know this. So the point here is that Isaac got everything. He was the son of promise, and so he received all of the blessings. The others were given wealth. They were given gifts, but they were sent away to other lands. This does not mean that Abraham, in a sense, disowned them or treated them cruelly, but the land of promise is what's in view here. And so he says, look, Isaac is the son of promise, that Jehovah God has given me this son, and specifically said that through him all the nations of the world would be blessed. And so Isaac gets to stay in this place where Abraham is, but all the others have to go find other land, kind of like Lot did, kind of like there's too much that's going to be going on here. We're going to grow to be too big. We can't all fit well into this land with all of our resources, and so you need to go elsewhere. Here, take these gifts that I'm giving you and go build for yourself whatever it is that you want to build. So that's what I believe that Abraham is saying here, not that he's being a mean dad. Hey sweetheart, welcome aboard. We're in Genesis 25. So he gave all that he had to Isaac and sent everyone else away. And it says, still finishing verse 6, and he sent them away from Isaac his son while he yet lived eastward into the east country. So the east country here, we're talking about heading into Saudi Arabia. We're talking about heading beyond that, maybe even into the Asian countries and what we think of as Russia. There's a whole vast field of land that is in the east from here. And remember, we're still not all that far removed from Noah. And so we have still a lot of just empty land here. It's not like people needed to fight over the land. If there was too much going on in one spot, then they could just pick up and move and go somewhere else. There was just this vast frontier of nothingness. Hey Liz, welcome aboard. So that's where these guys are headed. They're headed out east. They're spreading out that way. There may have been already people out there, but these guys are going out that way as well. Verse 7, and these are the days of the years of Abraham's life, which he lived 115 years. Guys, that's 175 years. He lived 100 years after God said, hey, leave your family, come into this land that I'm going to show you, and I'm going to give you a blessing. So he lives for another 100 years after that. He's 75 when he leaves home. And now he's 175. Then Abraham gave up the ghost and died in a good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people. And his sons Isaac and Ishmael. So Ishmael comes back for the funeral here. So even though that there's some separation here, and Ishmael being 14 years older than Isaac, he does come back. And they bury him in the cave of Machpelah, which is where Sarah was buried, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite, which is before Mamre. Almost as much land as Texas. That's right. So Abraham is dead, and he's buried here in the field which Abraham purchased of the sons of Heth. There Abraham was buried, and Sarah his wife. And then that's kind of it. Hey Tom, welcome aboard. So then we get into verse 11, and we're going to start talking about the next generation pretty full on at this point. And it came to pass after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac dwelt by the well Lahairoi. And that was the well that he was by when he first met Rebekah. So this place kind of has a bit of a meaning to him, and so he stays there for a little bit. And we're going to see he eventually has to move, but that's where he dwells for a little while. Now these are the generations of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's handmaid, bare unto Abraham. Now remember, when Hagar was out there with the boy in the wilderness, God blesses her and says, from Ishmael, there's going to be 12 nations rise up. And so Ishmael ends up having 12 sons. And so that's what we're about to read about. Verse 13, and these are the names of the sons of Ishmael by their names according to their generations. The firstborn of Ishmael, Nebajoth, and Kedar, and Adbeel, and Mibsam, and Mishma, and Duma, and Massa, Hadar, and Tema, Jeter, Naphish, and Kedema. So those are the 12 sons of Ishmael, the 12 nations that rise from them. And those people are still around today. The descendants of Ishmael are there in the Middle East, along with what we see as the Jews today, the Israelis, what we would call them today. So we're still seeing the people of Ishmael, and Hagar definitely was blessed, and Ishmael was definitely blessed. So verse 16, these are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names by their towns and by their castles. So these are city-states that are still being made. We're not into full-on true nations where multiple cities have come together, except for at this point in time you had the Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Akkadians, I think, are the three big superpowers of that time. And they're not really that big. Egypt is probably the biggest of those. But here we're still only reading about Egypt as it's centered around the Nile. It's not the same as what we see here in the next, Joseph is what really grows that. So when everybody else is dealing with a massive famine, that's when Egypt really grows in power. So interesting thought, Abraham was gathered to his people, yet he was in a land where he was a stranger. His homeland was Ur, right? He was buried in the cave of Machpelah in the field of Ephron the Hittite. His people weren't buried there, yet he was gathered to them. Maybe, Stephen, I think what it means, the gathering to his people, I think this is more maybe a reference, and I could be wrong on this. I think the gathered unto his people is kind of a metaphor for the funeral procession. That this isn't a lasting thing. This is just gathered unto his people is just they came together to see to him, to bury him, is my understanding of it. So it doesn't have to be a lasting thing. I don't see any context there to mean anything other than that, because we're going to see here again there are other people who pass away, and we're going to read the same phrase for them too. So let's see here. Verse 17, and these are the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years, and he gave up, well, here it is. So Ishmael lives to be 137 years old. He gave up the ghost and died and was gathered unto his people. It's an interesting phrase, because we're not talking about an individual. Hey, Peggy, welcome aboard. We're not talking about an individual here who somehow got scattered throughout all the land, and they had to go find pieces of him and bring him back together. That doesn't make any sense. So, gathered unto his people, I think, is really the gathering of the people themselves together for the purposes of the funeral and the wake and all of the ceremonies surrounding putting them in a tomb or a grave, what they called Sheol at the time. Hey, Solomon, welcome aboard. We're in Genesis 25 for those of you just joining us, and we are now in verse 18. And they dwelt from Havilah unto Shur, that is before Egypt, as thou goest toward Assyria. And he died in the presence of all his brethren. So you have this big family gathering here, and he dies in their presence. So, an old man, well blessed, surrounded by his loved ones, and that's the way he goes out. So I think this is what we're seeing here with Abraham. I think this is what we're seeing here with Ishmael. So, and these are the generations of Isaac. So that kind of fast forwards a little bit, because we're going to come back to studying Isaac a little bit more in this, and so we're going to kind of skip backwards in time, because remember, Ishmael is only 14 years older than Isaac. And so to say Ishmael lived 137 years old and then he died, well, we're going to go back and we're going to read about Isaac only being 40 when he takes Rebekah and 60 when he has the twins. So we kind of move backward a little bit in time. So don't get confused on the way that this is just kind of wrapping up. Moses is just, okay, I've wrapped up Abraham. Now I'm going to wrap up Ishmael. Now we're going to talk about Isaac for a little while. And so he goes back to verse 19. He goes back to Isaac and says, and these are the generations, or these are the years of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham begat Isaac. See, we go way back, all the way back to Isaac being born. And then Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of Padan Aram, the sister to Laban, the Syrian. And they keep bringing up Laban. Moses keeps bringing up Laban because Laban is going to have a major role to play here in a bit. And then verse 21, and Isaac entreated Jehovah for his wife. So he's going to pray to God because she was barren, and Jehovah was entreated of him. So God heard his prayer, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. And the children struggled together within her. I've had the honor of having a wife bear twins, and I know secondhand, obviously I didn't bear the twins myself, but I know secondhand what that might be like, having the twins be in the womb and fighting each other. My wife constantly was talking about how I believe it was Gwen picking on Cade a lot of the time, which is pretty funny, and that hasn't changed at all. So Gwen is my leader. Gwen is the one that's kind of bossing everybody around. So totally makes sense, even though she's the second born by 2 minutes. So I'm kind of relating pretty firsthand here to this story in a way. And she said, if it be so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of Jehovah. So she's like, what's going on here? Why am I like this? And she doesn't know. They don't have like sonograms and on all the fancy equipment and stuff. She just knows that something's going on in her belly that doesn't feel normal. Not that she knows what it's like to be pregnant, but she's like, wow, this is really rough what's going on. So she asked Jehovah, hey, what's going on? What's going on inside of me? And Jehovah said unto her, 2 nations are in your womb. Now, obviously, not literally. 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from your bowels. Karis, do you need some help? You need to get up and set that up, please. That's making a lot of noise. Can you get up and set up against the wall, or do you need my help? See if you can do it. All the way up. Push. You got it? You got it? Is it going to stay? No? Alright, hang on, folks. I got to go help for just a second. Alright, you can't put your feet on this anymore, okay? Because it's going to fall over. Alright? Alright. Alright, and we're back. So he says, verse 23, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. Now, we see this in Romans 9, and here is where the fact of the Israelite nation, hey Trent, welcome aboard, the Israelite nation and the Edomite nation are predestined. And my understanding of predestination has always been, from my own studies, that predestination is usually about nations. There have been some individuals that were predestined for specific purposes, never to salvation. There's never been a person who was predestined to salvation, but you have Jesus was obviously predestined from the foundation of the world to die as the Messiah, to die as the sacrifice. But here you have the predestination of these two nations. Esau never served Jacob. In fact, we're going to read here where Jacob was kind of a plain man. He's a homebody, and he served Esau. But the nations, that role kind of got reversed. And so when we read in Romans chapter 9 of the predestination of Esau and Jacob, what we're talking about there is the nations. We're not talking about the individuals. And I think that's very, very clear here that Jehovah is answering Rebekah's prayer in saying it's two nations that are in your womb. Verse 24, and when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. And Esau, it does mean hairy. And then after that came out his brother, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel, and so his name was called Jacob. And so the word Jacob means heel holder. That's like kind of a literal translation of the name. But then supplanter is the kind of a metaphorical name. It's a deeper meaning of the name. So let's see here. Cool, Stephen. Glad to hear that. So we're going to see Jacob kind of lives up to his name, the heel holder, the supplanter, the guy that kind of grabs on and holds on and eventually is going to supplant Esau in pretty much every way that matters. So, and I think that the reason that we see this, God being the all-knowing God, knows that Esau is going to go after strange women. And we know that Abraham was very clear that Isaac was not supposed to have a wife from the Canaanite people, all of the little city-states around in the land of Canaan. And so they were to get, that's where Rebekah came from. And then the same thing is going to happen for Jacob. Isaac is going to see, and Rebekah is going to see that Esau marries some of these local girls, and they're not happy about it. And so for Jacob, they go back to the same place where Rebekah came from. And I think God sees that and sees that Esau is going to be corrupted by these women who go after strange gods. Not that it's wrong to marry people of other regions or cultures or races or whatever you want. I don't really even like the word race, but the idea is that these women worshiped strange gods, and so they can pull you away into it's very easy for them to pull you away after strange gods, which we see time and time and time again. Solomon dealt with that, and how many of the kings of the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom were pulled away by their wives to worship these false gods. So there's this this looking forward that God is doing, and he knows what's eventually going to happen. But in saying that, he doesn't determine that. God is not saying that Jacob's going to make these choices and Esau's going to make these choices individually, but God already knows what's going to play out. And so he says, look, this is what's going to happen. and he's just relating here what he sees from the future. So anyway, they called his name Jacob, and Isaac was 80 years old. So he went from 40, now he's 60 when the twins are born, when she bare them. In verse 27, and the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau because he did eat of his venison, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So, we we see this a lot. The dads who are out playing sports with their sons, and they're gonna be more inclined to spend time with the children that are into the things that they're into, and Jacob stays around the house and helps mom out, and so they grow closer. And Isaac is like, son, good job hunting down that deer, and I love this meat that you brought back. Thank you. And so there's just this natural kind of relationship that develops between the parents. We see here a favoritism, and it's kind of this natural organic favoritism, not necessarily anything wrong with it, but the way that it is presented here is that Esau and Isaac had a special relationship, and Jacob and Rebekah does, and nothing good or bad is said about it, just that it is. And then verse 29, and Jacob sawed pottage. And I had to go over to the ESV for that. He sawed pottage. That sounds like he's putting dirt in a planter. And I'm like, that's not what he's doing. And so if you look over at the ESV, it says, once when Jacob was cooking stew. So sodding pottage means cooking stew. And Esau came from the field, and he was faint. And so he was just, he'd been out, he'd been doing his manly thing, and came in and exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, feed me, I pray thee, with that same red pottage, for I am faint. Therefore was his name called Edom. So Edom translates as red, because when he comes in, you've been out. Yeah, Jacob was a mama's boy. So Esau's out. He's out in the sun. He's already got red hair, and he is out exerting himself. And when you come in playing sports and stuff, your face is all flushed, and you're breathing hard, and you're exhausted, and you want water and maybe something to eat. And so they called him Edom because he was constantly this way. He was constantly red, just everywhere, red and hairy. And so Jacob said, sell me this day thy birthright. Ooh, you're sodding chicken right now, Stephen. All right. Are you a mama's boy too? No, I'm kidding. I cooked today as well. Yes? I don't know. If it's over, it's over. You'll have to find something else. All right, bring it here and I'll help you. So Jacob says, sell me this day thy birthright. And Esau says, behold, I am at the point to die. What profit shall this birthright do to me? All right, so you want something else is what you're saying? All right, here you go. Find what you want. So this birthright is the not the blessing that Abraham got from Jehovah, but this was the kind of the natural whatever kind of when we read about the prodigal son, and the son says, give me all that you're going to give me my inheritance. And so this birthright that Esau is talking about is the things that that Isaac are going to bequeath to him in terms of cattle and wealth and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, I'm about to die. What good is all that going to do me? So Esau doesn't really think much of that. He's a man of passion, a man of the now. And so he's like, just give me some stew. I don't care about my birthright. So Jacob says, "Swear to me this day." And he sware unto him, and he sold his birthright into Jacob for a pot of stew. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and a pottage of lentils, and he did eat and drink, and rose up and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. So Jacob has already got now a double portion from Isaac, because Esau is like, I don't care. You take all of it. It's all yours. Just give me some stew. And he didn't value it. And so since he didn't value it, he lost it. He despised it. So, and then after that, chapter 26, there was a famine in the land beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went unto Abimelech, king of the Philistines, into Gerar. Now, here's an interesting thing. I believe this is the same Abimelech that Abraham was good friends with. And I believe he's still around. Remember, people are still living for what we would call extended lifespans compared to what we live today. You're going to see here that his old captain of the guard, Phicol, is still around. So these are the same people, but Abraham and Abimelech were good friends, but Abimelech is the king of the Philistines. And he's not going to have as great a relationship with Isaac, mainly because he sees Isaac as so powerful, so much in the way of people and cattle. Remember, Abraham and Isaac, they're kind of these nomadic city-states wandering around as their cattle had need. And so we're going to see a little bit different relationship here from Abimelech towards Isaac. And Jehovah appeared unto him and said, "Go not down into Egypt." Remember, this is Isaac having to move because of the famine. So he goes to Abimelech, his father's old friend. And Jehovah says, "Don't go down into Egypt, but dwell in the land which I shall tell thee of. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee, and will bless thee. For unto thee and unto thy seed I will give all these countries, and I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father." So, how many times have we made rash decisions in a moment, sacrificing something far greater, only to regret it in the end? This helps us identify with these characters. They were people just like us. That is absolutely true, Stephen. Exactly so. For a momentary thing, a thing of insignificance, we would, what do they call it? Pleasure for a season. This is what sin is really like, is giving up something of eternal value and importance for a momentary pleasure, a momentary thing. And I think this is like a very, very just vivid picture of what sin really is like, is to give up just for a moment of happiness, or a moment of kind of shallow happiness, something that is far, far more important to us. Mom says, despised implies utter contempt. Esau scorned God's promise given to the heirs of Isaac. You're right. Despised implies utter contempt. He definitely had that absolute contempt, but the birthright here is just the normal inheritance. This isn't the promise. We're going to see later that he loses that as well. That the blessing of Jehovah that was given to Abraham and to Isaac is going to go to Jacob, because Esau will make a distinction between the two. He lost his birthright and he lost that blessing. So I don't think we're talking about necessarily that promise just yet. But absolutely, he despised what his father had and what his grandfather had built for him. And he's going to end up having nothing except what he can get with his own two hands. And so, sad state for him. He's going to have some pretty major consequences for his choice. So, anyway, God is telling Isaac, stay here in this land that I promised to your father, and I'm going to bless you the way that I blessed him. I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and will give unto thy seed all these countries, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. So here's that blessing. The blessing that God gave to Abraham, now he's directly giving to Isaac, who is that son of promise, that only begotten son in our terms from before. Because that Abraham obeyed my voice. Why did God bless Abraham? Because Abraham obeyed. How important is obedience to God? It isn't that just Abraham believed God would do these things, but that Abraham obeyed God. And so God is saying that this is the cause that I blessed Abraham, is because he obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. That's why Abraham was blessed. If Abraham had just believed that God would do all those things, it would have been insufficient for him, and he would not have received the blessings. That's why James 2 talks about how Abraham was justified by his works. His faith alone was insufficient to justify him, to receive the blessings of God. Just like today, our faith alone is insufficient to receive the blessings that are in Christ Jesus. Faith alone is dead. And if we try to say that we can be saved by faith alone, then we're trying to say that we can be saved by a dead faith. It takes an obedient faith, a faith that is coupled and inseparable from works. And it is when we obey the gospel that when God says, if you are immersed into Christ, that's when you come into contact with the blood. That's when your old man dies and your new man is resurrected. God tells us what we need to do. We got to hear the gospel, believe the gospel, repent of our sins, confess our faith in Christ, and then be immersed in water to receive remission of sins. And if we do those things, then we are saved, not by just believing, as so many teach. And so Abraham is our the kind of the biggest example of this, said over and over again, both in the Old and the New Testament. So God's saying to Isaac the same thing. If you do all these things that Abraham did, I'll give you the same blessing. And so Isaac dwelt in Gerar, that's the land of the Philistines. And I'm sure he heard the story from Abraham about what Abraham and Sarah did when they were here. Remember, Abraham did it twice. But one of the times that he did it to Abimelech. And so Isaac's going to pull the same stunt his dad did. And the men of the place ask him of his wife. So this isn't Abimelech himself doing it, but it's the men of the Philistines asking, hey, your wife's pretty good looking. Remember, Rebecca's a really good looking girl. It says that like explicitly. And so when they come into the Philistine lands, the men ask Isaac about Rebecca, and he said, she is my sister, for he feared to say she is my wife. Now in this case, Isaac is not telling the truth. She is a distant cousin. I think we determined third cousin or something like that. I don't know how those work, but she is not a sister. So he is definitely not telling the truth here. But he says, for he feared to say she is my wife, lest he said the men of this place should kill me for Rebecca, but she was fair to look upon. She's good looking. And so this is a lie that Isaac tells. Notice he doesn't really bring Rebecca in on this, but it's just something that he says. And so it came to pass, when he had been there a long time, that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out the window and saw, and behold, Isaac was sporting with Rebekah his wife. That word sporting there, he's just in a... He didn't look out the window. This is not like a David and Bathsheba type thing or anything like that. He's not catching them in an intimate moment. But what he does see is he sees them... probably the way that they're talking, they're laughing, they look like they are in love. And you can see there's a difference between a brother and a sister, the way they interact, and a man and a woman when they are in love with each other. And so Abimelech sees them just out in public and the way that they're acting, and Abimelech's like, they're not brother and sister. And so that's what is going on in verse 8. Verse 9, and Abimelech called Isaac and said, behold, of a surety she is your wife. I know she's your wife. Hey, Jeremy, welcome aboard. And And why did you say she's my sister? And Isaac said it to him, because I said, lest I die for her. So he's saying for the same reason. Fondling is the Hebrew. So I'm going to look that up. I've not heard that before. Let's see here. That's way up here. All right. When I saw sporting with his wife. So the word is sakach. It's a Tsachaq. To laugh, to mock, to play, to jest, to sport, to play, make sport with, toy with, make a toy with. So it may have been that. I don't see that. First of all, the context doesn't necessarily demand that, and then from what I'm seeing from the original language, the translators are saying it's from the primitive root to laugh outright. And so they may have been tickling one another, so there could have been some of that. But I don't necessarily see showing endearment. They were obviously doing something only married couples would do. Yeah. So maybe, Brian, that might be something that's implied, but I don't think the word calls for it. So verse 10, and Abimelech said, what is this that thou hast done unto us? One of the people might lightly have laid with your wife, and you should have brought guiltiness upon us. So Abimelech's, playing lovingly, tickle fight, something along those lines. Hey, Destiny. So Abimelech's remembering back to the time when Abraham did this, and he knows the consequences. He's like, look, why are you doing this? You're the son of Abraham. You're obviously blessed by God, and you're going to get one of my people in trouble who is innocent. And so Abimelech's like, look, everybody, pay attention now. He sends out kind of a decree to all his people. He says, don't touch Isaac's wife, okay? Because if you do, you will be put to death. So Abimelech is kind of nipping Isaac's fear in the bud there, and taking care of it. And he's like, look, anybody touches her, you're going to die. So Isaac, and we don't read any more about it. To go fight. That's so Elf. Oh, yeah, definitely. One of my wife's favorite movies, by the way. So there's nothing more said about this. It's just, it happens. It's a thing that takes place. We don't, again, really address the fact that Isaac was lying. We just address the fact that, this was a thing that took place, but Abimelech reacts the same way. So Abimelech is still a good guy. He's the king of the Philistines, which they're kind of this somewhat large city-state, but you're going to see here in a moment, he's not as big as Isaac and all of his people and all of his herds and servants and all of that. So that there's going to be a little bit more strife here. So verse 12, and Isaac sowed in that land and received in the same year 100-fold, and Jehovah blessed him. So Isaac didn't go to Egypt. He stayed where he was supposed to. So God blesses him, and he receives 100-fold back from what he sowed. And the man waxed great and went forward and grew until he became very great. So God is just really cranking out the blessings here, his physical possessions. For he had possession of flocks and possessions of herds and great store of servants. And the Philistines start to envy him. Remember, the Philistines had a good relationship with Abraham, but Isaac's getting so powerful, they're now afraid of him. And so, for all the wells which his father's servants had digged in the days of Abraham, his father, the Philistines had stopped them and filled them with earth. So they dug all these wells, and Abraham was living there for a while, and then he left. And so the Philistines come behind, and they, I guess to prevent other people from moving in to the land, they went and filled in all those wells that Abraham had been using. Well, now Isaac's there. And so they're worried that Isaac is going to overwhelm them. So Abimelech comes to Isaac. He, again, in good faith, he doesn't want trouble. He's trying to find a peaceful resolution. And Abimelech said unto Isaac, Go from us, for you are much mightier than we. So you guys, there's more of you. You've got more people, more stuff. You need to kind of head on your way. God has blessed you. Time for you to go. And so Isaac departed. So they leave peacefully. He departed and pitched his tent in the valley of Gerar, so not too far away, and dwelt there. And Isaac digged again the wells of water which they had digged in the days of Abraham his father. So they're going down. They've got these wells there. There's some, I'm sure, some remnant, the stones that they put around them, and maybe I don't know if they did the whole bucket and winch thing or whatever, but he redigs these wells for the Philistines had stopped them after the death of Abraham, and he called their names after the names by which his father had called them. So he remembers them, and he calls them by the same name. And Isaac's servants digged in the valley and found there a well of springing water. And the herdmen of Gerar did strive with Isaac's herdmen, because he's not far enough away, is the problem. So you've got the herdmen of Isaac and the herdmen of Abimelech, people. They come there, and they're like, the water is ours. And it's not. They had filled the well, but they said that it was. And so they called the name of the well Esek, which if you look that up, nope, not that one. Nope, not that one. Not that one. Esek means contention in the original language here, because they strove with them. And so they move a little bit further away, and they digged another well, and they strove for that one. And he called the name of it Sitnah. And Sitnah stands for strife. And so he removed from there. So he's moving further and further away. And so he digged another well. This is the third well. And there wasn't any fighting, because he was finally far enough away. And so they didn't strive for that one. So he called the name of it Rehoboth, and said, For now Jehovah hath made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. And so Rehoboth stands for wide places. And so it was a big enough place. He had moved far enough away from the Philistines, still in the land of Canaan, but had moved far enough from the Philistines that there was room for him and all of his herds and cattle and servants and all that. So he went up from there to Beersheba, and Jehovah appeared unto him the same night and said, I am the God of Abraham your father. Fear not, for I am with thee, and I will bless thee and multiply thy seed for my servant Abraham's sake. And he builded an altar there and called upon the name of Jehovah. So again, he builds an altar, and he calls upon the name of Jehovah. He worships God. Again, I want to point out that the way that the Bible talks about worship, in the Greek it's proskuneo, that there's a specific time, a specific place, an intention, specific actions that are taken. A lot of people want to say that everything we do in life is worship of God, and that's simply not the case. We see time and time again that men set aside time, and they build an altar, and they call upon the name of the Lord in this place, because worship is a very specific thing. It is not everything we do. Now, we can say that everything that we do in life is service to God. We should live as a living sacrifice to God, and we should keep in mind that every word that we speak and every action that we take reflects on the church. It reflects on the Lord that we serve. But it is not worship. Worship is a very specific thing, and it always has been and it always will be. So I do not agree with all life is worship crowd. So and then to call upon the name of the Lord, again, when we see that calling upon the name is doing the things that God said. We see in Colossians 3:17, whatsoever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord. We see in Acts 22:16 that Ananias tells Paul or Saul of Tarsus, now why tarriest thou, arise and be baptized, calling upon the name of the Lord. So there's a specificness to this phrase, the calling on the name of Jehovah. So anyway, so he builds an altar there, he pitches this tent there, and there Isaac's servants digged another well. Then Abimelech went to him from Gerar, and Ahazath, one of his friends, and there's Phicol, the chief captain of his army. So this guy is still kicking as well. These guys got to be pretty old at this point. Isaac is 60. So if we do some calculations, Abraham would still be alive when the twins were born, because Isaac was 0 when he was born. Abraham was 100. Isaac was 60 when the twins were born. Abraham would have been 160. He died 15 years later. So this is after the boys are grown, obviously, and Abraham is already dead. So for Abimelech and Phicol to still be kicking, these guys have got to have some pretty long lifespans. Maybe they were younger than Abraham, certainly, when Abraham met with them. But remember, Abraham, we're talking 75 to 100 years old. What was he? What were they? 84, I think, if I remember correctly, when he met with Abimelech. So you have Abimelech and Phicol still around, and they're definitely the same people. So Isaac said unto them, Wherefore come ye to me, seeing you hate me, and have sent me away from you? So Isaac took it wrong, I think. And he's like, you hate me, you sent me away from you, I thought we were friends. And Abimelech says, we saw certainly that Jehovah was with you, and we said, let there now be an oath between us, even between us and thee, and let us make a covenant with me. So Abimelech's going to be like, look, we didn't send you away because we hated you. We sent you away because we're afraid of you. And he's like, we came out to you now because we want there to be this lasting, continuing peace like we had with your dad. And so he says, let's make a covenant that you will do us no hurt, as we have not touched you, and we have done unto thee nothing but good, and have sent thee away in peace, and thou art now the blessed of Jehovah. So Abimelech recognizes that. Again, I make the contention that there is a likelihood, we don't know for certain, but there is a likelihood that Abimelech understood who Jehovah was, and at least respected him if he didn't worship him himself. We'll see later, of course, that the Philistines are corrupted, and they go away from what Abimelech thought. But anyway, so he made them a feast. Isaac makes them a feast, and they did eat and drink, and rose up sometime in the morning, and sware to one another. And Isaac sent them away, and they departed from him in peace. So they're like, okay, yeah, we'll make that covenant. There's not going to be any fighting between us. We'll go away as friends. And so they departed in peace. And it came to pass the same day that Isaac's servants came and told him concerning the well which they had digged, and said unto him, we have found water. And he called it Sheba. So there's a new well, and they call it Sheba. Therefore the name of the city is Beersheba unto this day. And Beersheba is well of the sevenfold oath. So, and it's called that, and I think it's called that all the way into the 1st century AD when Jesus is around. So we will go yonder to worship, and the lad and I will come back. Yeah, definitely. Talking about the worship being a specific thing. So, verse 34, and Esau was 40 years old when he took to wife Judith. So remember, Isaac was 60 when the twins were born. So now Isaac is 100 because Esau is 40. Esau was 40 years old when he took to wife Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Bashemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. And so he takes 2 wives of the Hittites from the land of Canaan, which were a grief of mind unto Isaac and to Rebekah. So these 2 women were not acceptable. They caused all kinds of problems. Not good daughters-in-law at all. So some interesting history, some interesting things. I love keeping track of the numbers and just kind of seeing where everything fits. It's like a big Sudoku puzzle or a jigsaw puzzle for me to just kind of keep in mind a little bit how old everybody is and what's going on. And I love looking at timeline charts for when all of these events are taking place and stuff. So, we're getting to the end here now. Isaac is 100 years old, and we're getting to the end of his life. I think he has maybe one more chapter left. We'll see him give the blessing to, he gets tricked because he's old. He gets tricked by Jacob into giving him the blessing, but he's already got the birthright. Jacob's already got the birthright. And I think after that, we won't read much more about Isaac. So thank you for joining me tonight. I know it was a long one, but I wanted to get through 2 chapters. If I did 1 chapter every night, I don't feel like I would be making any headway. And I don't want to stay in Genesis for the whole year. So, and I know I can't do these every night. So, thank you for bearing with me for these 2 chapters. Tomorrow we'll do 27, maybe 28. And like I said, in times past, if you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the comments. Love for you to share the video if you got something out of it. And hopefully we'll see all of you tomorrow.